Federal Parliament's had plenty of focus on the voice this week, with the bills to frame the referendum going through the Parliament at the moment. It looks like there'll be no more changes to the constitutional wording, which actually might please some of the no campaigners who've run some pretty exaggerated scare campaigns about what those words might mean. Now, most polling has shown about 60-40 support for the voice, but the latest Resolve poll a week or so ago showed a dramatic drop to 53-47. So we're going to see where all this goes. But I asked the Minister for Indigenous Australians Linda Burney whether she's worried that the no campaign is building and the voice referendum could fail.
I have no doubt about the referendum. I think it's going to be successful. And the reason for that is what I'm seeing out there on the ground. I was in Melbourne on the weekend for the long walk with Michael Long, and I went to the football, the Dream Time at the G. I went to a number of forums in Melbourne, and it was just so positive and so uplifting. And when Michael Long announced that he was going to walk in support of the voice, the crowd just erupted, and it was just such a positive feeling. So I believe that we have the momentum behind the voice. The AFL, NRL, all the major sporting codes, the religious groups, the unions, and most importantly, Australian people, and even more importantly, poll after poll tells us that there is about an 80% support within the First Nations communities.
Yeah, I've got no doubt that across the country there's a lot of support for reconciliation and recognition and goodwill between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. But as you know, this in the end comes down to a political and a legal and constitutional question. There is a lot of scaremongering going on, some of it quite exaggerated, and certainly it's been very persistent. I don't think this has been rebutted very strongly by the government and the Yes campaign, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to rebut some of these scares. And so why don't you tell us why the voice cannot possibly exercise a veto or a delaying tactic against any government actions in the future?
Well, that's a very important question, and thank you, Chris, for asking it. The third clause of the amendment makes it absolutely clear that it is the voice that decides what it's going to give advice on, and it's up to the Parliament to decide what advice it will receive and act on, and that is explicitly in the amendments to the Constitution, as you know. And of course, there is going to be the scare campaign. I think the misinformation, disinformation is becoming very clear, but slowly and surely the misinformation and disinformation is becoming less and less, because each of the nonsense that's being sprouted is being dealt with.
I did just want to come in and highlight that point you mentioned about the third clause, because there is a perception that the wording has not changed at all, but there was a very important addition made through the committee process. We can see it in capitals here, where it added in matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. So this means that Parliament won't just make laws about the voice, but about how the Parliament deals with the voice. That is, what topics it can give advice on and how it engages with executive government. I think that that's been an important change that's been overlooked by a lot of people, Minister.
Well, that is the change that you're referring to is extremely important. It makes it very clear that the voice is there as a permanent, grassroots, independent body that will provide advice on matters affecting First Nations people. That has always been the intention, and now it is crystal clear. This is an independent body chosen by Aboriginal people from the community in terms of providing a permanent, ongoing voice to not only the government but the Parliament of Australia.
Yeah, it's important, as you say, it's a grassroots organisation. Grassroots Aboriginal communities would choose the people rather than this idea of a Canberra elite, which is one of the criticisms. Let me get your response to a couple of really important cut-through criticisms, though, from the No campaign, and that is division, racial division. Explain to me why you say this will not divide the nation along racial grounds.
This is not racially divisive. This is about making sure that we don't continue to fail Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This is also about all Australians being proud, Chris, that we are finally going to recognise in our Constitution 65,000 years, and no other country, no one else in the world can be so grateful to live in a country that has that story.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, a really important concept. This is not just about doing something for Indigenous Australians, it's actually about making the whole country better. And so on that point, let me get your response to another criticism then that the No case makes, and they say that this is conferring a special right on Indigenous Australians that won't apply to other Australians.
This is about the most disadvantaged, the most vulnerable people in this country. And the reason that the referendum is so important, and this is really something that I'm saying to people watching us tonight, is that it makes it a permanent, consistent body protected by the Constitution. Lots of people say to me, well, why don't you just legislate it? Well, that is not what we are proposing, and it's certainly not what Uluru proposed. The constitutional protection is important because it makes it a permanent body. And then people say, but there are 11 Aboriginal people in the Parliament. Isn't that a voice? And I just give you the example of my good friend Ken Wyatt, who was the first Aboriginal person elected to the House of Representatives. He lost his seat in the last election,